Welcome back to another episode of the J Future Podcast. I have Nicolai here with me again. I'm one of your hosts, Luis Duque. We'll be talking about annual reviews, and I think as we approach kind of the middle of the year, I know we know there's a lot of companies that have their own annual reviews kind of around this time or in the second half of the year, kind of looking ahead to the year ahead. So we wanted to get this kind of summarized. I mean, Nicolai is a manager, so he has conducted his own annual reviews, and obviously I've been on the other end of the conversation where people are conducting ad reviews on my performance. So I thought it was going to be an interesting conversation between the two of us in terms of what to expect from both sides and how to, if you're a manager, obviously how to make the most out of the annual review, make sure the people you're working with are achieving their goals and are progressing their careers. And as an engineer, how can you conduct the annual review in terms of looking ahead and how you can get information from your manager in these like one-on-one conversation that sometimes doesn't happen naturally throughout the year, and you can become a better engineer later on. So let's just kick that off. Nikolai, how are you doing today, and just give us a quick overview on kind of your maybe experience on conducting on reviews in the past.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm doing great today. It's a awesome Monday morning, so just grateful to get started on a new week. If you haven't done anything so far, now if you have maybe listened to me talk about annual reviews before, and maybe you actually put those plans into place, you already have 9 months of preparation that you've been doing over the last 9 months, and all you have to do is get that last month for review. But if this is going to be your first time ever on an annual review, maybe we can just kind of discuss real quick kind of what to expect. Typically your manager will schedule something with you for a one-on-one. They may or may not bring somebody else in the room. So, some of us have managers that we don't work with directly. So, ideally, in that case, they either reach out to those project managers that you work with directly and ask for some feedback, or they'll invite them into the room with you. uh, some of my reviews have taken place in a restaurant. Some of the smaller firms that I've worked at, we just had a casual conversation over at a restaurant. They sent me a piece of paper to kind of do my own evaluation. They took the same piece of paper and evaluated me, on their point of view, and then we kind of compared notes at the restaurant. I really liked those. But if you are new, you have no idea how the annual review works at your company, ask your supervisor. Maybe it's a few months out, but ask them, hey, I want to make sure that this goes very smoothly. I want my career to go this direction, and so I'm preparing for it. I think they'll be impressed by you getting a heads up on that now. What about you? Have you had any unique review experiences?
So for me, I've worked mainly in just like smaller firms since I started my career. The first real job was at a bigger firm, but I didn't really stay there long enough. It was more of a long-term internship, so I didn't really have an annual review. The second company I worked for, we didn't really have like annual reviews at all. I would just kind of every now and then just talk to the owner of the company who was kind of project manager and overseeing everything, and we'll just discuss how I was doing and just kind of get feedback. I think more frequently than probably other firms, just for the nature of being a small firm, and I was working directly with him 90% of the time. At the company I'm at right now, we have kind of formal annual reviews, but I'm kind of curious to hear kind of your side because I think you're now in a bigger company. I don't know if you have gone through the cycle of annual reviews, but for us is kind of what you're describing on your first example of we kind of get two questions to reflect on, like what were the things we did good or not so good in the past year, and what do you see yourself in 5 10 years kind of in your career, just to make sure like the company goals and like the employee goals are aligning and we're not kind of drifting apart. um, but that was my first experience 3 years ago. So for me coming in, I wish I had something like this, kind of what to expect during that annual review process and how to make the most out of it, because coming in with just a few maybe days of reflection on what happened throughout the entire year is probably not the best way to approach it. And I'm excited just to touch base on that on this episode, and hopefully for newer engineers and students coming into engineering, these can help them a lot.
Oh yeah, for sure. Um, not a lot of people like these annual reviews. I guess I'll say that. I've had employees where we had a rating system, and 1 out of 5, and I made it very clear 5 does not mean perfect. 5 means that you are doing the best you can do, you know? And they just hated writing down any numbers at all. I mean, I am very hard on myself even, so maybe one year I'm a 4, but the next year I'm a 3, and I've done way better than the year before, but it's because my standard moved forward. And so, I'm kind of rating myself on where I want to be necessarily, not necessarily what the manager is seeing of me. But not a lot of people like these. I
Mhm.
personally do. I feel like it's a really good way to kind of get a measurable um, assessment of where you are and kind of an idea of where you want to go. At some of my previous companies, being smaller, we spend a lot of time actually talking more about what can the company do better for that person than what that person could do better for the company. And I don't know how many managers we have listening to this podcast, but I will just say, if any managers are, if your team hears a negative feedback from you for the first time at these reviews, maybe there needs to be a lot more discussions happening, during the year. I tell my team I'm not doing my job if this is the first time they're hearing something from me. So these meetings should be, hey, let's look at our goals. Let's look at where you've gone or where you've come from and what you've accomplished this year. Let's look at all the software that you learned this year. And now let's create a new plan for what we're going to do next year that aligns with that 5 year goal that you mentioned, Luis, that you've been at. So
Mhm.
yeah, I've asked similar. This will be my first year with this company, so I think we're going to do things a little bit differently this year. But I'm hoping to at least include some of my old routine with my team members, just because I think it's a great opportunity to connect and encourage, and hopefully they leave a little inspired, so that they can just have a really good year.
Yeah.
But I guess one other little sidebar, real quick. Um, you should be having conversations throughout the year. And I'm just gonna share a little something that happened to me last week.
Mhm.
So one of my employees, we were talking about goals, and I was reminding everybody to update their goals in the goal software that we have here at this company. And I said, let's have a meeting. We'll discuss them. And one of my employees, we've had just about monthly conversations, but we have not talked about her goals once. And I didn't even know that she had any written in there. And I had to apologize to her, because other employees, they'll bring up their goal list during our monthly conversations, and we'll kind of look at them. And this one, I did not even know that she had done one. And so I just said, look, that's on me. We will not do that again, and let's discuss your goals, every month moving forward. Because if you set them and then you don't discuss them the entire year, what's the point of them?
Mhm.
So that's kind of the hope that we have for these managers, is to be having those conversations with the team.
Yeah, no,
And
that's
then
just to add to
yeah,
that.
oh, go
Just
ahead.
yeah, I think just to add to that, it just having those regular conversations is important just for I think both sides of the spectrum. I think you as a manager want to be knowing what's going on, and I think something you mentioned that if you hear something for the first time into an review, I think there is something that needs to be changing overall, like the process, the communication, the comfort that both the employee and the manager have with each other. Because if you cannot say something outside of that, let's say, protected space of the annual review, there may be something that needs to be changed in order to move both goals forward and making sure everyone's on the same page. And that's something I have reiterated to my managers, and we technically don't have like a specific manager at our company. We just kind of have like project managers, and they are the ones that you work under and communicate frequently. But I just told everyone like, hey, I'm okay with you giving me feedback, even if it's hard. Just tell me I'm doing something wrong. Because if you don't tell me I'm doing something wrong, I'm never gonna know what I need to improve on. And obviously, there are certain goals and things that we set during the annual review that then we kind of touch base throughout the year. And I make sure I have 15-minute conversations with them to make sure I'm on track with those goals. Uh, but I think it takes effort on both sides as well, like you were saying, make sure those conversations are happening and having the confidence to bring them up even outside of the annual review. I think it's super important.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So I know we're going to discuss kind of how to prepare, because that really is the meat of this conversation. I just want to start the how to prepare with reminding everybody, do not assume that your supervisor or other managers that you work with are going to remember everything that you've done throughout the year. I would love to say that I remember every, attaboy or attagirl that, one of my project managers said about my employees. I wish I remembered every class that they completed, but I don't. When you have nearly 30 people on a team, it's very difficult to remember every single thing. I remember a lot of the good highlights. Maybe I remember like the top highlight from every person, but we have to highlight everything that we did, and so don't assume that your supervisor will know. So that's where this next part of the conversation comes into place, is okay, how do we prepare? And then we could even get into like the awkwardness of promoting yourself and highlighting yourself. I know that's weird. I mean, I feel weird doing that, but I think there's a good way to do it. And then remembering excuse me, remembering that this is really impacting your career, potential raises, all of those sorts of things is a very important thing. So how to prepare? Do you want to start us off on some of the steps that you have taken on preparation for these annual reviews?
Yeah, and I think I don't know if you and I have directly talked about it, but I think I have talked about it a little bit on this show before. But it's just kind of keeping track of everything. So I keep kind of a few things on hand, just a notebook all the time, just to make sure I'm writing stuff down. Sometimes that makes it into Notion, where I kind of keep kind of maybe more long term stuff. But just keeping track of those things, even if it's on paper and you put it in a notebook and then you can review it later. But more important than just writing everything down, I think, is making sure you read through it monthly, quarterly, for your own benefit. Even just see how you're progressing, see how your thoughts are changing, and how your maybe comfort level in the company is progressing, and that just informs your annual review later on. Even if you're not sharing that with anyone else outside your own, you have that step by step kind of annual view of everything that is happening. But you need to be doing kind of your monthly and quarterly review at a minimum, just to make sure you're on track. And I try to do that fairly often, at least once a month, or even weekly. If there are weeks that are really busy and there's a lot going on, I try to just kind of write down what went well this week, what didn't go well this week. And then looking back at those things is going to be a lot easier to then come back to the manager and say, hey, this is what happened this year. These are the projects I've been involved in. Kind of keeping that record of everything that was happening throughout the year. I think that's one of the best ways to do it. I think you have some good examples as well. So let's jump into those and we can elaborate on that.
Yeah, sure. Well, along the lines of, how to even keep track of some of these things, I have a folder on my Outlook that I just put a miscellaneous company is what I put it in there. But really, it's like Nikolai's highlight reel. I just feel awkward calling it that. So, if anything comes through, good job on that, or this was a really good, or whatever happened, I archive it in that folder. And so then at the end of the year, when I start preparing for my annual review, I'll go in and start to review some of these things. And, I want to bring to my supervisor's attention some of the big ones. If it impacted scope, schedule, or budget in any way, or helped the project be successful in one of those areas, you really want to highlight those. You want to get specific numbers if possible. Did you save the project $10,000, or did you make the company $100,000 profit on the project? How many projects did you deliver on time, or how many projects did you deliver within budget? um, and then maybe you can find a way to highlight some of these skills that you improved. Maybe you increased your public speaking skill. Maybe you improved your leading a meeting skill, whatever it might be. See if there's any sort of way you can kind of assign some sort of measurable thing to it. So that way they can see, okay, you started here at the one in January, and now you're here at the end of the year. So ideally, there's specific numbers. If there are some like big quotes, let's say like a big supervisor, a big project manager said, "Luis, you were so essential in this project. We could not have done this without you. This project was a success because of your involvement on there." Like, bring that email to your review. You want to have that ready, because then you could say so and so said this about me on this project. That goes a long ways. Now we don't want 100 of those, but if we wanted to get like the top ones, I would bring those in there. Especially because again, it's a little harder to kind of self promote. At least that's been my experience, and so I maybe want to be too modest in these sorts of opportunities or discussions, but this is not the time for modesty at all. Like we're not here to like brag and just be so proudful or anything like that, but we do want to share uh why we want a good review, why we feel like we have brought value to the company, and understanding that value that you brought is going to be very good too. If you can clearly define, supervisor, I think I am valuable in these ways. That will be a really good way just to help guide that conversation. What was the it factor, whatever it was. I have an employee, she's in Utah, and I've only been with this team now for 8 months, and so I'm still learning who they are. But this lady jumped in and was just offering up help for everybody. I mean, we're all working till 10 p.m., 11 p.m. I'm having printing issues. She's not even on my team for this particular project. She finishes with her team, she jumps over to my team, and she stayed up late multiple nights just helping us get this project done. Like, okay, I'm going to remember that because it directly impacted me. But if I was not on that project, I would want her to bring that to me. I would want her to tell me, this is what I did. Maybe here's an email from the person that said thank you for what I did, just to kind of prove it. I mean, those are things that you want to be highlighting to your supervisor. Maybe you helped win a project because you went above and beyond. You did some reconnaissance, or you were asking the clients what the goal was for the project, and you wrote that in your, understanding of the project, approach and understanding. Um, you know, highlight that and how you were involved on helping win that project. So yeah, I think those are some specifics to do. I guess one other thing to do is, uh, here we're not trying to be boastful and too prideful here, but do an honest review of yourself, and don't be too hard on yourself. Again, that's kind of been in my issue, or the things that I have struggled with, is being a little too hard on myself. But do a really honest review of yourself before the meeting. See if you can even bring up some potential items to bring up to your boss. So it just helps that review go that much easier. So those are some things I would say on how to prepare.
Yeah, and I think those are great points. And one of them resonated with me, and I wanted to like zoom in a little bit. As a manager, I think you have a lot of the information on the budget and the schedule and everything. Do you tend to communicate that to your or the people you're working with on your team? And how can an engineer that maybe doesn't have as much as understanding to the budget and to the timeline and schedule and everything keep track of that in a way that makes sense to bring up in the review and have those concrete numbers that kind of you were talking about?
That's a really good question. Every manager does it differently. I probably am too open, maybe, with some of my team. So, if I know, wow, we do not have a lot of time to complete this project, I'm very clear with them. And I tell them we bill what we need to bill, but we don't have a lot of time, in our budget for this particular project. And so we'll just kind of, I don't try to do it too often. I don't want to stress them out about it, but I definitely bring them up to speed and kind of share, we have 100 hours for this project, or we have 6 weeks full time on this project, whatever it might be. If your manager is not that open and doesn't keep you involved, or keep you informed along the way, I would recommend, whenever you get a project, to ask your manager how many hours is budgeted for your work. I mean, hopefully they can at least answer that question. You have 100 total. Maybe they're not going to remind you you've used 50 or you've used 80 or whatever, but just ask them. I'm trying to keep track because I want to make sure that I'm doing a good job. So could you at least tell me how many hours for this project that I have, so I make sure I can deliver this, on time? And if they do, then create like a Notion or a OneNote or an Excel spreadsheet, kind of tracking your time every week. And when you fill out your timesheet, maybe you worked 4 hours on that project that week, and then the next week you did 40. And so you're just going to keep track of it. And that's one way, I guess you can say, so and so said I had this many hours, this how many hours it took me to do it. I think it was good, whatever. So there's one way you can get a concrete number, I guess.
Yeah, and I like that. And yeah, it's kind of hard as an engineer or as a non-project manager to figure out how much you have in a project, like what's the really the budget, the schedule. I've had sometimes being told like, yeah, we have 2 weeks to do that. We have 80 hours to complete this. Um, but as an engineer, I think you have almost the responsibility to ask that to make sure you are on track with the project. I sometimes, especially if I know there's a task that it just came in and we know it's a fast turnaround, I ask, hey, how much time do we have to finish this? How much of my time do you need? And I was pulling it up here on my phone. So if you're on YouTube, you can watch it, but I have an app that tells me how many hours I
Hmm.
have worked on, and I put like my billing rate, which I mean you should be able to find, and it tells you
Oh,
how
wow.
much you have spent on projects and everything. So I think that's a good way to automatically kind of keep track of that. And I think it costs like I don't know $7, and you can have it in your phone. And just I that's kind of how I keep track of time, and then I just put it on the company's timesheet at the end of the week. But that's an easy way to just have it there. You can set like, hey, I have 40 hours to work on these, and it kind of tells you how much of that you have used. And I think that is probably one of the highest leverage points you can bring to your annual review and show your supervisor that not only you care about doing great work, but you're also watching for budget and time, which I think as project manager, that's probably one of the biggest pain points on a project sometimes because it takes a lot of effort to manage a team and keep them in budget and on schedule. So definitely a great
Right.
tip for an annual review.
Yeah, that's really good. I think that the app is a really cool idea. I guess some last things for the review preparation is look over your goals. Especially if you set goals with your supervisor at the beginning of the year or at the last annual review. I want you to be able to be clear on what you've accomplished,
Mhm.
the progress that you've made. Maybe you didn't complete the task, but hey, I got 80% there. Let's celebrate that. If there's softwares that you learned or went out of your way to learn on your own, highlight those things because that adds value to your team, and now you're better equipped to work on other projects. And then have your future goals already ready. Again, if you show up to this meeting with your supervisor and you are this prepared, it's going to make their life a little easier, which makes them a little happier. And it's just going to benefit you. So the more prepared you are, and the easier you make this meeting, it's just going to benefit you that much more. Your supervisor is going to take note of that as like, wow, so and so is really on top of things. Yeah, so get that 5-year goal. I mean, setting goals in itself, we could talk about that. I'm sure we've talked about that already, multiple times. But just make sure it aligns with what is important to you. I guess one last thing I would offer up to people is goals need to be your own. So this even goes to my team. Do not just blindly take a goal that I give them. Do not just blindly take a goal that your supervisor gives you, because you will not love it. You will not be invested in it. It's going to be hard for you to go a little above and beyond. And so maybe I could offer up a few options, but you as the employee really need to make it your own. You need to make it align with things that are important to you. You need to be able to find a way to you're backing up the goal basically, and then make so. um, that would be my last kind of tip there. So any other tips before we maybe talk about some questions to ask your employer during those reviews?
No, I think those all of those are great, and especially with the goals. I think we talked about that last week on kind of the mid-year review of goals and everything. And I mentioned that I kind of keep all of them in a note card on my notebook, kind of present always. And I think that can informs your monthly goals, that informs your weekly goals. And I think having a way to not only just set the goals and forget them for the year, I think it's super important, but having a way to being able to look back at them and really have the actions that need to happen each month, each week, it's more important than just setting the goals. Because if you just set the goals and forget them, nothing is really going to happen. And you're going to come to this end review with the same goal as last year and not making any progress. So this is the time to really, especially if you have a few months or even a year to complete your annual review, make sure you're setting those goals and just make sure you're keeping track of them and making sure you are taking action at least monthly and reviewing them and seeing what you can do that month to make progress on that. Future goals kind of get informed from that. So let's just talk about that here. And I think one of the things that I like to do in the future goal category, especially for these annual reviews, is just talk about how both the company can help me and where I see myself in 5, 10 years helping the company. So I think that's the annual review is not for you to say, hey, in 5 years I want to, uh, I don't know, become a great engineer and I want to start my own company and have this outside dream, because immediately you're gonna see that the two paths are gonna start different a little bit. I think this time is where you have to look yourself as a part of the team in the company. And I think how can you help the team? And I think the goals that you set here are, yes, they're good for you because they're going to help you move to the next stage in your career. But more than anything, are goals that should be able to help the team as a general, the company as a general, to make more revenue, bring more clients, find more projects. As a company, they want to see that from you. And more important than all, more than they want to be a place where individuals can shine and individuals can improve themselves. They want to see that everyone is working towards the same goal in the company, and making sure everyone is working towards the communal goal. I think. How do you see that future goal conversation? How have you done it in the past?
No, I mean, I think you hit on that really well. Yeah, I mean, as the company, we have our mission and we have our values. And these these reviews are an opportunity to make sure that everybody kind of gets realigned to the values and that we are all moving forward together using goals to kind of set that process or those action items to all get there. So I don't know. I don't know if I have anything else to add based on, other than what you said. I thought that was really good. I would say, just like I mentioned, that not everybody likes to really do these annual reviews. Not every manager is really good at doing these annual reviews. You know, if the manager doesn't like them, him or herself, maybe they just kind of want to get in, get out. So make sure that if you get an hour with this person, come in prepared with some questions of your own. Ask them about maybe they see that you're doing with holding up those company values. Maybe ask them, here I am. I've been doing these projects. What's the next career development, what's the next couple steps that I can start preparing for? It's going to take years to get there, but if you don't have something to view, if you don't have that vision set, like you even mentioned already, the 5 years, what's happening in 5 years? If you can't clearly see that, how are you even going to start to get there? You're just going to wander around aimlessly until something sticks. But how much better is it when at least you can move in a direction? And yeah, maybe you pivot, and a lot of people pivot, and that's fine. But at least it's just you're not aimlessly going somewhere in that case. So, ask that supervisor questions. Ask them to see if they would be comfortable sharing any blind spots that you have. Maybe your communication style isn't very good, and the way that you talk to people, we know that you're the nicest person in the world, but when you talk to somebody, you make them feel this small, whatever it might be, and you just don't realize it. It might be you're a little slower on the software side, and that's okay. If you're learning the software, I fully expect you to be a little slower, and I'd rather you be slower and get it done right versus, we have to do it 5 times because you're rushing. But again, it's nice to be aware of that. And now you have something to go forward with and say, okay, my manager identified that maybe a little bit slower on this software. How can I get better? It's not that we're trying to make you feel personal, negativity or anything like that. Hopefully, all of this is in the spirit of how do we get better? How do we improve? How do we all go forward? As a manager, I hope to ask my team during these annual reviews, how am I doing? And I hope that we have built a team so full of trust and comfort that they would feel good sharing something with me about that. If they're scared to share something about that, then I know that I have not really done my job well. So, I hope that they come ready to share that. Now, not every manager is going to ask for that. So let me say, don't offer it up unless somebody asks you. But I'm going to be asking my team. So if my team's listening to this, just be ready for that.
Yeah.
Um,
Let me touch on
what else?
something that I think it's important to know too is these annual reviews are almost like a mini job interview, I think.
Yeah, kind of.
In the sense of yes, you're working at the company, you are getting to know everyone, you're doing a great job, but I think they're evaluating the company is evaluating your performance and you are evaluating the company's performance in a sense in terms of how they fit within your style of work, in your interests and everything. And I think the more honest these conversations are, the closer aligned both the employee and the employer are gonna keep growing together, and obviously both are gonna benefit tremendously from that. I think one aspect that we haven't touched and we probably won't touch today is the financial aspect of it. We are planning on doing a future episode on that alone because we think is an important topic. So definitely subscribe if you have not to listen to that episode. I think in a week or two after this comes out, but that's an important aspect as well. But do you agree with me that these annual reviews are more of a kind of an interview or like a mini interview in terms of like how both the employer and employee see each other and how they can grow together in the future?
I think that's a really good way of kind of structuring it or explaining it. I mean, just like an interview, you're trying to show off your best skills and strengths and how you're going to bring value to the company. Well, the reviews is how did you bring value to the company, and then turn it around and say, okay, in the next year, this is how I can plan to continue adding value to the company. So there's a lot of similarities there for sure. You want to identify those current roles and responsibilities, how you've done, maybe get an idea for what that next role and responsibility is so you can start preparing for it. Somebody asked me, I was doing a presentation at a location a couple weeks ago, and somebody said, if I just got an opportunity to be a supervisor, do you think I should take it? And my first thought is, well, have you been trying to get that supervisor position? Like if it just fell in your lap, I would maybe pause a little bit. But if you have been intentionally trying and like you've had your eye on that prize for 2 years or 1 year, more than a week, definitely, and you've been trying to actively, proactively get to that role, great. Yeah, if something comes along your way and you weren't necessarily ready for it, let's see what you can do. But if you weren't and it just kind of accidentally stumbled into it, that might be a little harder. So again, that's kind of where we go with that aimlessly going one way versus at least having some sort of direction to move forward with. um, you know, sharing the quotes, just to kind of wrap up, sharing those quotes and the praises that you received working with those managers and clients. Man, if you got something from a client, definitely share that. That'd be huge. Think of all the different societies that you're volunteering with. What roles do you have? Did you help plan one of these community service events? That could be a really good one. Um, knowing that value you brought to the company, scope, schedule, budget. We talked about that. Were there any programs on the horizon? Are there any conferences that we need to start budgeting for the future? We want to get that into our budgets for sure. Should be ready with your biggest wins, your biggest lessons, your biggest contributions, and just find a method that works for you. I've pretty much only used Outlook. I know that you've used Notion. You could use anything, but just write it all down, keep a record of it somewhere, and that'll really help your review go that much better.
Yeah, and I think just getting networking with people that are outside of your company is a great way as well, especially if you are part of societies of committees that are involved in kind of the business aspect of engineering. Because I think there's a lot more than just design work, and there's a lot more that engineers are expected to do outside of just technical stuff. I think you as a manager probably see that every single day. But as a young engineer, sometimes we're just kind of stuck in the numbers, and we think that's all there is. We complete a project, we move to the next one, but there's a lot more stuff kind of going on behind the scenes. And I think as younger engineers, it's important for us to understand what's that? How do you complete an estimate? How do you find new projects? How do you do all of these things that bring money to the business? And the more you understand that, the more you're gonna be able to help the company increase revenue, increase client retention, and all this stuff that is super important for everyone to keep progressing our careers, to for us as engineers to make an impact in society and continue doing the work we do. So these annual reviews, I think it's an important place to start, but look beyond that and look beyond just your simple day-to-day work and know there's a lot more out there. Any final thoughts before we close out today, Nikolai?
No, just don't be shy. This I think my early years I was maybe a little too shy, a little too timid, and I luckily had some decent bosses, good bosses that helped me push forward. When I wasn't pushing myself forward. But yeah, like this is your career. You are doing this for many years, and why not be proactive with it? Share your wins. That's a really good thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you listen to this episode on YouTube, make sure you leave a comment with your favorite question you have received in the annual review. I think that's always fun to hear what people have to say. If you're just listening, go to Substack, and then you'll be able to leave a comment out there too. We read every single comment. We receive emails and comments on social media. It's always fun to hear what people are saying and connect with us as we continue creating these episodes for you. So make sure you are connecting with each other and with us to hear more of this. Thank you, Nikolai, for another great episode, and I'm excited for future episodes. If you really enjoyed this episode of the Engineering Future Podcast, you're going to love the content we have over our website at luisfelipeduque.com. You can find the link in the description of this episode as well as the show notes at luisfelipeduque.com/podcast. Every episode comes packed with a lot of links, a lot of information. So you can find all the show notes and all the information related to this episode over at luisfelipeduque.com/podcast. Thank you so much for coming back to this episode. Thank you, Jack Winters, for the music. And as always, let's continue engineering our future.